Not reacting to the narcissistic person sort of delusional-ish stuff. Listen, all of you who are looking for revenge against a narcissistic person, not reacting may be the ultimate revenge because you remove the supply. So let's talk a little bit about being tactical. They certainly are. So let's help you be a little more tactical when you have to have contact with a narcissistic person. So because you are not going to eliminate all narcissistic people from your life, none of us can. I mean, unless you really are literally going to go live off the grid, and even then, I'm not sure you will. But figuring out how to interact with narcissistic folks becomes key. Now, this original idea for this video came out of an experience I was having with some folks who kind of were like sort of, I don't know that I would say they were narcissistic, but they were definitely narcissism adjacent. These were people I had to work professionally with, and I needed something from them. And I really, really in my heart wanted them to be supportive, and at the time I was very vulnerable. So I couldn't help myself. I was also tired, so I was vulnerable with them, and boy, did that backfire. Now, as I came out of the phase of feeling vulnerable and upset at how they behaved, I came back into my wiser mind, and I recognized that I had no choice. I had to interact with these people, especially at that time, but that I could also teach myself to interact with them in a way that accounted for who they were and what they were about, and that I needed something from them. And they were only going to be able to deliver on some of what I needed, and only in a certain way. That's a them thing. But I was angry at myself for not getting that, for wanting them to be something else. That damned hope still gets us. Even me, who does this all the time, studies this all the time, and I wanted them to be better, but they couldn't be better. And once I got clear-headed, I was able to be very tactical on what to ask for and what not to ask for. And I was able to then sit down and do the problem solving of where do I get the other stuff that I need in my life from. It was a real aha moment for me in real time, because I didn't want to see the narcissistic-y patterns in these folks because they mattered to me. But once I understood them, I was getting less burned. It's like a pot that you cook with a lot, where you thought the handle wouldn't be hot, but when you touched it, it was, and you got burned. And then you thought, well, maybe I just didn't grab the handle the right way. And you do it again, and you get burned again. Now, I, for a variety of reasons, did not have the luxury of stepping away from these relationships, a fact with which I'm sure many of you would empathize. But I could get tactical and be very clear about what do I need. And I laid it all out, and then be very clear on what these folks could do for me and what they could not. This really takes us to radical acceptance, right? And it's so uncomfortable because theoretically they should have been able to do all of it. But the word should is a very dangerous word in this landscape. I then disengaged. I turned to them for what I knew they could give, and that was that. Did the warmth leave the relationship from my side? Absolutely. But this was a work-related thing, and I was able to see that these folks were really, really good at the things that they could do to support me. So I got that, and I left. That relief and lightness that comes from truly getting, from truly understanding what someone is about, and then living in that reality, it's almost akin to like losing a lot of weight instantly. You instantly probably feel lighter. So that initial grief can be a setback, but ultimately you do feel lighter because you very clearly see it and you know it. Now, when I shared my point of view with other people who were associated with the project, I got some pushback that I was being cynical, this whole tactical thing. But it really wasn't, because I was much more free and I was feeling better. I was feeling better even in my body. When we admire some aspects of a person, we end up wanting them to be the whole package, skilled, but also warm and empathic and responsive and supportive. And one of the tricky bits of narcissism is that some narcissistic people, many in fact, are often very good at one thing or something. And that being good at something can be quite helpful, depending on how we interact with them. But they're often not well-rounded human beings when they have this personality. We have to be able to see that because, frankly, these highly skilled yet highly unempathic and highly invalidating people may still offer something we need, and we may still need to work with them. Now, this tactical approach may be a bit more difficult to apply in closer relationships, such as romantic relationships or family relationships, but it can still work. It's about asking them the things that they will do because it works for them. You leave that part out, or it feels good for them, and just stick to those things, but recognize that they aren't going to do things like check in with you or ask you how you are feeling. Now, what I am about to say will sound really cynical. I'll own this. But this is kind of a cynical video, so I am going to own it. So in a way, you can think of a narcissistic person like an app. An app can only do what the app does, right? An app lets you order your lunch or buy a plane ticket or turn on your air conditioner or order a car. That's it, nothing else. You don't expect your Uber app to soothe you after a bad day, or your Delta Airlines app to thank you for folding the laundry. Actually, the app does sometimes say thank you. But when we strip it down to its essence, the narcissistic folks actually do treat us like apps, right? They do view us as something that gets something done for them or offers up supply. It's not easy to hear, but it is what is happening, right? You're sort of the app on their phone. They go, praise needed, supply needed, punching bag needed. Now, the key to this is to not allow this appy stance to pervade all relationships, that you're able to see the mutual and kind and loving people in your midst who are able to be whole people and to whom you need to bring your whole self. But thinking that you can get that everywhere results in the exhaustion of disappointment that is such a daily struggle for anyone who's enduring narcissistic relationships. The other struggle is that if we are not tactical, we often just want to give up. And especially at work, it doesn't work. We may end up doing more of their job than we need to. We may not get the guidance we need, or it may simply be impossible for us to do our job without them. But we have to recognize that these are folks who will not go the extra mile or be creative or use sort of innovative problem solving to help us out. So be tactical and get what you need from them, and that's that. I'm not so sure, though, interestingly, that the narcissistic folks are being tactical with us. I don't think they are. I believe that they're just being them. They're just taking what they need. However, for the rest of us, when we have narcissistic relationships in which we must interact, work relationships, certain family relationships, friendships, we have to be tactical, get what we need, and stop waiting for what we can't and recognizing we won't get it. The alternative of getting nothing at all from them may simply not be viable, but it always loops back to radical acceptance and openly recognizing the limitations inherent in all narcissistic relationships. It may not be in your nature to be tactical in your relationships. It's not in mine, honestly. But at some point, it does feel like being tactical is basically radical acceptance and practice. Was there grief before my tactical experience? Absolutely. But when the grief passes and you see the situation realistically, and you do it this way, honestly, like I said, it was like someone literally lifted 100 pounds off my back, and I thought, this feels much easier. Grayrocking may simply be not reacting to the narcissistic person. Because again, Grayrock, everybody talks about Grayrock, right? It intuitively makes sense, but it's still not something that everyone fully understands. At the core of Grayrock is to make yourself as uninteresting as a Grayrock. That means brief responses, short responses, not engaging. Now, some people do really take Grayrock to its most Grayrocky, boring extreme, really just giving one-word answers, yes, no, in a very flat way. But that can sometimes result in a silent treatment antagonistic vibe, which is never a good idea because it can sometimes place the Grayrocker, who is just trying to survive, in yet another negative light and face more criticism from the world and from the narcissistic person, I should say, they are attempting to Grayrock, right? I love Grayrocking as a tool for communicating and writing. And yellow rocking, Tina Swithin's technique, enlivens that gray rocking a bit and makes it feel a little less antagonistic. But here is another way to think about gray rocking, and that is as simple as not reacting. And heaven above, this may be one of the most difficult things you could do. This is like really advanced gray rock. But it may be the best interpersonal use of gray rocking. Not reacting doesn't mean just sitting there silent. It also doesn't necessarily mean that autonomic, quick reflexive freeze response that so often happens to people in narcissistic relationships. Not reacting is sitting through the gaslighting, the misattributions of what you said, being told how you feel, being told what you intend, listening to the lies, and not reacting strongly. Perhaps we could call it tactical dissociation, because that to me is the true core and the hardest part of gray rocking. Not reacting to the narcissistic person's sort of delusional-ish stuff. Listen, all of you who are looking for revenge against a narcissistic person, not reacting may be the ultimate revenge because you remove the supply. Narcissistic people need other people's emotion. It's like blood to a vampire. Your getting upset is in some twisted way how you show that you care, and they kind of get two for the price of one. Your reacting and your emotion shows them that not only can they evoke these strong feelings from you, which helps them feel like they're in charge, but also it serves in their eyes to make you look bad. Because if you were to react the way you really want to react, angry and emotionally, it would be pretty unfettered anger. You may raise your voice, you may use obscenities, you may pound your hand on the table, you may want to walk out of room, you may even want to slam the door. And if you're to do these things, then the narcissistic gaslighter would actually feel better and look at you with a mix of disdain and contempt and disgust, and maybe even mockery and humor, and tell you, ugh, you're so out of control, and what an unhinged, mean, awful person you are. Because you are reacting to their lies and their gaslighting and the work of fiction they've written around this relationship. Gray rocking in this case then means you don't give that to them. It's turning off the oxygen supply. And folks, it's literally the hardest thing you can do. And you can't do it too often because over time it will take a toll on your health. Holding back this much emotion and enduring this kind of emotional manipulation is the equivalent of a bubbling stew of viruses, bacteria, and parasites. If you get near it, you're going to get sick. Ergo, the fact that most survivors of narcissistic abuse often get sick, and often it's not unusual to see things like chronic pain, autoimmune, and other chronic health issues. But that is the best of gray rock. When you're able to do this, you got it. And then something happens after you get to this level of gray rock. You are better able to let go of the relationship. If it's a family relationship where you may find yourself still having to show up, or if it's a job you cannot yet leave, when you get here, and yes, it's exhausting, there's a clarity you get. You see the narcissistic person for the frothing, malcontented, manipulative, dishonest person that they are. And when you are still like that and see it, you can't unsee it. When we defend ourselves against the narcissistic person's accusations, when we get into the mud with them, we are actually giving some credence to their position as though what they're saying could be right. At a more extreme example, if a person were to talk to me and tell me that they are Napoleon and invited me to visit King Tut in the gardens of Babylon, I would know that this poor person is not in touch with reality and probably wouldn't engage with them that much. That example is obviously more obvious. And we wouldn't engage with them, and we may not be mean to them, but we may not think we're going to see King Tut anytime soon. We would not give credence to them. They are not Napoleon. King Tut is not visitable anymore, and the gardens are gone. So when a narcissistic person tells you how you feel, makes up things that you said, makes up things that happened, lies about what they are doing, and expects you to read their mind, and you know they are wrong, Is that any different than the person who thinks that they are Napoleon? There's no point in engaging. But in narcissistic relationships, we spend years engaging with this madness. When you truly Grayrock and don't engage, it's checkmate. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to rage. You not engaging will make them more manipulative, more angry, more cruel. It will turn up the volume on the baiting. I recall a woman who no longer reacted to her husband's baiting, and her husband said after multiple episodes of her Grayrock not reacting that he wasn't interested in having a polite relationships. Sometimes this technique also gets you the answer that you always suspected, that they really were in it for the fight. Will you have grief? Yeah. But after the grief comes clarity. Sometimes we have to stand still to really hear all of the noises, to really understand what is going on. Our back and forth willingness to engage with the narcissistic person sometimes blocks us from really seeing what is happening. Once you no longer react and you truly Grayrock, you see it. In many cases, I suspect that we keep engaging with them because at some level it does keep a relationship alive, even though the interactions are unhealthy and awful. The minute you stop and don't react, you're kind of subsequently forced to see it. You will never interact with it the same way. It's not easy to do this sort of full-on Grayrock, don't react. And you can't keep doing it. If you do, outcomes like feeling depressed or anxious or exhausted or burned out or depleted are common. But if you're caught in a loop with them and really want to Grayrock, to stop reacting to them, even though it is painful to start this, it will give you the full view of what this relationship is. And if you can white knuckle to the other side, you will get it. That seeing and getting it may mean dread and exhaustion anytime you need to see them. But that dread and exhaustion is a messenger. Pay attention to it. Learn from it. But again, the Grayrocking really being not reacting is probably one of the most pure examples of how Grayrocking works. It's also probably one of the most difficult to pull off. But if you have some opportunities, especially maybe even in lower stakes narcissistic relationships, to give the Grayrock non-reaction a try, give it a try. See how it feels. You will see that at times you feel as though literally you're bleeding some sort of energy out of you as someone's saying all these falsehoods to you and you're trying not to engage with it. But try it out in different ways. There will be times that it'll feel impossible. There will be times that it puts up the volume. But that's what I'm saying. Experiment with it. Be curious with it. But it's not sustainable as a long-term strategy. Once you start doing Grayrocking, non-reacting, at some point you're sort of putting a long-term timer and a countdown on this relationship. Ultimately, it's just too exhausting to do this, but it's definitely a wake-up call. Narcissistic people are very, very, very good liars. Now, they're not as good at lying as psychopaths. Nobody is that good, but they're good. Lying is second nature for narcissistic people because really it's self-preservation for them. It allows them to maintain their grandiose narrative and their sort of idealized depiction of themselves. Because lying serves such an important psychological function for narcissistic people, it's almost reflexive. For a narcissistic person, think of a lie as a scaffold that holds up their entire sense of self. If you try to move the scaffold or dismantle it, the thing that it's holding up, and in this case, it's the entire sense of self that the narcissist has as what a great person they are, for example, it'll all collapse. And that's not a very good feeling for them. All of that brings up all kinds of shame, so they avoid doing that. We all lie sometimes to some degree. Let's face it, all of us lie. Typically, our lies are sort of socially facilitating, maybe protective lies. We tell people they look nice when they don't. We tell them that the dinner they made was delicious when it sucks, that their dog is cute when not so much. Our other option at those times is either silence or hurt feelings. But let's face it, there are lies and then there are lies. Bigger ticket lies hurt, and they destroy the foundation of a relationship because over time, you don't know what's true anymore, and trust fades, never to come back in the same way. In the absence of truth and trust and honesty, there's absolutely no possibility for a healthy relationship. Now, there can sometimes be confusion between a lie and gaslighting. Gaslighting is a little worse because you can't shift the gaslighter's perspective on the basis of evidence, and gaslighting is meant to dismantle your sanity. Lying, in theory, can be pushed back on with evidence, but that evidence isn't going to work with a narcissistic person. But because that lie, like I said, is basically acting as a scaffold for the narcissistic person's ego and their sense of self and their falsehood of being a good, nice person, that it would collapse if you try to call them out on it. Instead of copping to the lie or owning it, or maybe even just being defensive for a minute, but then ultimately being contrite, all you're going to get from a narcissist if you call them out on a lie is rage, rage, and more rage. You may even get little projective twist arounds where you get accused of being the liar. And it turns actually into a gaslighted mess pretty fast. I always view that the lie is sort of the exit ramp and then the gaslight's where you're going. Now, without being able to call out a lie as a lie, many people wonder, how can a relationship sustain or proceed? Well, I mean, that's a different question, isn't it? This relationship was never a healthy relationship. Narcissistic relationships are never based on respect or trust or mutuality of regard or compassion. So trying to address the lying, while it feels important to you, it isn't going to address the fundamental issues of the relationship. The lying is a symptom of a much bigger problem. The lies make narcissistic relationships, which are already very confusing, even more confusing, because some narcissistic folks lie basically for sport. They lie about absolutely inconsequential things like where they got the bagels that morning. I think some of it may be sort of that inherent oppositionality that is a part of all narcissism, a sort of tiny rebellion, a way of maintaining something that feels like dominance or power. Many narcissistic folks learned to lie pretty skillfully at a pretty young age. Many would lie in the name of grandiosity, telling small lies that became bigger lies to get validation or admiration or to generate envy. And over time, the lying almost becomes sort of a lifestyle and simply a part of who they are. While that full point deceit and lying that cuts through everything is more of a pattern of lying that we tend to see in psychopathy more than in narcissism. For example, lying, using different identities, lying about their families, lying about their histories, about their jobs, about their names. And the lying in psychopathy is much more consistent with parasitic and exploitative lifestyles. In narcissism, the lying appears to be much more about getting admiration, maintaining a grandiose sense of self, and an image of perfectionism, and maintaining a false narrative. So many people, when they really catch a narcissist in a lie, they have the evidence, they have the bank statement, they have the photo, the video, the text. They view it like a smoking gun. They're sort of Perry Mason day in court kind of thing, like they've got the evidence. They think that they have the aha moment against the narcissist. Unfortunately, even with all of the evidence in the world, it will always devolve into something abusive and mean and awful and gaslighty. The evidence doesn't help, and all of that ickiness can make it all feel even worse. There are times when there is nowhere for the narcissistic person to hide when there is a lie. They may start with rage, then throw in some projection, toss on some gaslighting, and then there may even be a moment of defeat and deflation when they're caught in a lie. That doesn't often or always, certainly doesn't always happen. It doesn't even often happen. Too often, the other person in the narcissistic relationship is so frightened by the rage or so trauma bonded or even struggle with their own abandonment issues that there is that tendency that we often see in narcissistic relationships to appease or apologize or just try to put the episode behind them before the narcissist is actually pushed to that point where they might have to own up to the lie. But lots of folks wonder, when I catch them in a lie, what should I do? You have likely suspected and experienced them lying to you for a very long time. And when you have the proof, at a minimum, it may not change them, but it could be a way to ungaslight yourself. But trust me when I tell you, you're not going to get an aha moment and an apology. You are more likely to get denial and more lies. Ultimately, when you catch them in a lie, and if you find yourself remaining in the relationship, the best you can realize is that you are in a relationship with a liar. And you, as a result, you have to hear most of what they're saying with a grain of salt. They won't come clean, and it's on you to make a choice on how to proceed with someone where you can't believe what's coming out of their mouth. But if you feel that you need to confront them, there is no way that you're ever going to lead them to ownership and accountability. But I understand that you want to face them down on their lie. They're going to rage and gaslight and accuse. And you know what? Some people are okay with that. They just want the narcissist to know that they know, like, I see you. And for some folks who intend to stay in these narcissistic relationships, let's face it, the narcissistic person isn't delusional. They know you know their game. And you knowing gives you a little bit of power. But it does mean that you can't let yourself get lulled by their apologies and their future faking. If you stay from that unenviable position of not being able to trust. And that is at best a deeply superficial relationship, which unfortunately over time may not be good for you. Being in the presence of deceit is really being in the presence of something toxic. Over time, when you can't trust someone, really, what is the point of a relationship? It's a tough one, but I hope that answers that question. What happens when you face them down with a lie? Let's talk about that difference between not personalizing what the narcissist says and then not taking it personally. A lot of people have found this distinction to be very sort of confusing, and they're saying, golly, this certainly feels personal to me. And in fact, there was one email in particular I got about it. I'm like, this person was actually not happy about it. So I thought, let me break this one down. So this is a tough one. And it's one that more than a few people have asked about, and even clients I've worked with have asked about this. And I see now and I understand the confusion. So part of this video is also to sort of break through that confusion. So many of you know, as I give guidelines for how to cope with narcissism, narcissists, and narcissistic abuse, is to not personalize their behavior, okay? But many people say to me, dude, how the hell am I not supposed to make this personal? This person is gaslighting me, insulting me, criticizing me, undermining me, basically dehumanizing me. It's freaking personal, okay? Yes, it is personal, but let's take a step back. In most cases, I know it doesn't seem like this to you, but they actually are sort of equal opportunity offenders. They do tend to be dismissive of just about everyone, contemptuous of just about everyone, gaslight just about everyone. You, the coffee shop clerk, family members, colleagues, but you're going to get it worse. The closer you are into the narcissist's orbit, the worse it's going to be, especially if they're a partner. And then you say, no, Dr. Ramani, they are two-faced. They are nice to their friends. They're nice to that jerky guy they work with. They're nice to their grandiose business partner. They're nice to their father who gives them money. Oh no, I've seen them be nice. So let's take a look. Let's break this down a little bit. Let's take a look at those relationships where your narcissist is nice. You're right. They can be two-faced. They are two-faced. Narcissists will put their best face on and bring narcissistic supply to people they value or admire. Those are often people with money, with power, people they deem as somehow virtuous or aspirational. And it can be rare for them to find these people that they think so highly of because they themselves are so jealous and competitive of other people who have the things they want. But when narcissists find people that they value, and maybe They value these people because those other people, these people with the power and the money, make promises they want to hear, bring some other value added. They might be a great wingman or a great wingwoman. They may be giving them money. The narcissist may be getting power or recognition simply by having this relationship for this person. And then the narcissist might actually become really good at being narcissist enablers for bigger narcissists. It's like that diagram where the big fish eats the smaller fish. So that is why your narcissist can seem two-faced, and it's important to this video to understand that. And narcissists are sprinters, which is why they have an uncanny ability to fake it for a few hours and seem charismatic and charming for one evening, during one event, during one family reunion. But behind closed doors, you get the pleasure of experiencing the very worst of them. It's as though they get worn out from being charming with other people. They need supply. Narcissists need supply, so they need to be charming to get it. They have you locked down, so they don't need to do that with you anymore. So let's go back to this issue of personalizing. I had to lay out that context. So, like you said, they're two-faced. They have those special people they're so nice to. Let's say one of those special people that they like so much lets them down. Or someone at a party that they're being so charming and charisma-ing at insults them or slights them in some way. Just sit back and watch then. That other person who seemed to be getting the best of your narcissist is very quickly going to see the worst of them. Again, equal opportunity offenders. They're going to go at anyone who gets at their insecurity. So let's go back to the original premise. This is what this video is supposed to be about. Not taking it personally versus personalizing it. When we talk about taking something personally, it's an acknowledgement that their behavior hurts. And taking it personally when a narcissist is abusing you absolutely makes sense. If someone gaslights you, it's abusive. If someone invalidates you, it hurts. You feel something. That's absolutely personal. I get that. But here's what's interesting. Their behavior is actually not about you. You're like a piece of furniture to them. It's really about their fragility, their lack of empathy, their incapacity for intimacy, and their incapacity for closeness. When I say don't personalize it, what I'm trying to say is it's not about you, although it affected you. It's like if it rains one day, the rain isn't about you, even if it ruined your party. This is an important distinction. I never want anyone to feel, ever in these videos or in my work, as though I or anyone else is telling them to not feel. Obviously, you have to feel. Your feelings are always valid. You feel when someone treats you badly. You feel anxious, angry, hurt, a whole host of feelings. When I'm giving the guidance to not personalize it, I'm trying to give you a tool to disempower the narcissist's words. If you think someone really is calling you out on your shortcoming or failing, or even something that's not really your failing, it feels awful. But if they're calling you out on something because of the voices in their head, that's a very different example. So bear with me while I use sort of two examples to try to teach this. The first example is going to be a bit of an exaggeration to make my point. You're walking down the street in a city. A person you encounter is on the sidewalk, disheveled, unkempt, and clearly doesn't have a consistent home. Next to them are their strewn belongings, all sort of in and out of a shopping cart. They start coming up to you and say, "You're ugly. You're as ugly as a Martian. I know you're ugly inside and you're inside and out ugly because you were sent to get me. Go away, you ugly person. You're an ugly Martian. You stay away from me." Would you personalize that? Probably not. You may assume this unfortunate person is living with a severe mental illness. You may walk away quickly. You may even feel uncomfortable, fearful, or even angry. All feelings. It would feel personal because it was targeted at you in that moment, but you wouldn't personalize it. You wouldn't believe you're an ugly person from Mars, right? Would you? This example obviously is an easy one to get your head around because the commenter is clearly mentally ill and you don't know them. There's nothing other than them saying terrible things to you, but you wouldn't personalize it. You might even barely take it personally. So let me try another example. A hypersensitive narcissist in your midst gets snippy with you because you shared your feelings about a situation that had just unfolded between the two of you. You share your feelings appropriately. Perhaps you say to this narcissistic person, you know, I feel sad. I'm sad that we just haven't been doing the basic things that people do in a relationship together. And on top of that, the bulk of the workload in this household is falling on me. I'd love it if we could share it a little bit, like divvy it up so we could do things together. And then they respond, oh my God, ugh, you are being ridiculous. Will you stop being so sensitive? Can't you see? I have deadlines. Do you really think that cleaning out the garage is spending quality time together? Good Lord, you sound like you're crazy. Get some help. If something as small as, oh, we don't spend time cleaning the garage together makes you sad, what about then? All you did in that scenario was share a feeling. That's it. And in fact, you wanted time with them. That's it. And then you got a soliloquy on how you are ridiculous and potentially mentally ill. So can you apply the same rubric here as you did when you were called a Martian? That this is the narcissist's inability. Can you view it through the lens that this is the narcissist's inability to process any kind of emotion? So they gaslight you and minimize you. Your feeling is valid. Their response is what's abusive. You aren't mentally ill for wanting to express a feeling and a desire for a connection. If you can view it from that perspective, then you are not personalizing it, even though it feels personal. You can then place the bad communication into the narcissist. And yes, there's nothing you can do. No words you can say to stop their gaslighting. I know it feels helpless, but it's true. All you can do, though, is take your power back by recognizing that their dismissiveness and is unacceptable, frankly, and your reality is valid. Dealing with narcissists is an exhausting way to live. That's the bottom line. Anyone's going to acknowledge that. And the more you've got, the more exhausting it is. Constantly reminding yourself to not personalize something that feels personal is a very tough distinction to make in the moment. But whether you do it in the moment or in a few minutes, it's important to make. Because if you do not have the luxury of no contact or getting distance or really good boundaries, you need to find a way to stay sane. So yeah, your life with a narcissist is a series of dismissive, invalidating, minimizing, even dehumanizing moments. Daily, hourly, and it is exhausting. And yeah, it is definitely taking a toll on your health. But when you can create some kind of mental distance, even if you can't create physical distance, that's important. You need to recognize you can't change them. Stop wasting your time on arguments that go nowhere and spend that time cultivating and owning your reality. At a minimum, at least, you can get some much needed perspective if you do that. And of course, it becomes very, very important as part of your healing to establish healthy relationships, healthy friendships, collegial and community relationships that go back and forth, that are mutual. Anything that gives you an antidote to the black hole one-sidedness of a narcissistic relationship. So I'm asking you to do something that feels impossible, but it's very possible. I'm asking you to stop personalizing the personal. Give it a shot. It's my hope that this video explains the difference. And even as I sat down and thought about this video, I'm like, I'm actually asking them to do the impossible. And even as you're not personalizing, when something's personal, it does take a toll on you. It absolutely takes a toll on you, okay? So you need to give yourself a moment at those times, whatever your healing ritual is, and I'm going to be having a video coming out on healing rituals in the next few weeks, but this idea of if something feels personal, it is exhausting. It is awful to have your reality doubted. It's awful to have someone make fun of you. However, when you can say, yeah, this doesn't feel good, just like, I don't know, cold, blustery rain doesn't necessarily feel good. You can also recognize that I don't need to personalize this. The rain isn't coming from me. And while the narcissist's words feel cold and harsh and awful, they do this to everyone to protect their fragile sense of self. If you can catch yourself in the moment and do that, you will actually be amazed at how strong you feel in those moments. It takes a lot of practice. Trust me, even personally, this is a skill I've been honing for years. And when you get it right, and it's a little bit easier when the setting's not as personal, like at work, when I've done it, I'm like, I'm feeling mighty strong right now. And this used to be a person and a situation that would get me worked up. It's a lot harder when it's a family situation or a relationship situation, but I swear you can get there. You may not get it right every time. If an argument's really, really personal, really cutting to the core of things that are core issues and core wounds for you, this distinction I'm making here doesn't always work. But if you can get it right a significant chunk of the time and really understand this personalizing, personal distinction, you'd be surprised at how much more it makes these relationships endurable. So as always, thanks again for tuning in. I hope I made this clear. Let me know if I did. As always, these comments become very important to all of us. Give me a like if you liked it. If you didn't, I get it. And then also hit that notification bell and we'll let you know every time we put out new content. Bye.